Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it. Welcome, Kari. I'm so glad to have you on our podcast.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here and to meet you, Michelle.
It was nice to meet you. So tell us what you do.
Aha. That's always a popular question. I get that quite a lot. And I do a lot. I think people probably think I just stand up and read poems all day. And sometimes I do. I travel around the state of Ohio and contiguous states. I've gone as far as Seattle. I go down to the South because you probably hear a little twang in my voice, and that's because I'm Appalachian. And so I go down into Tennessee and the Carolinas and Kentucky and West Virginia. This next spring, I'll be going to Los Angeles for the AWP conference. And I'm also going to Dublin, Ireland in May of 2025 to represent Ohio because my mama's people were Irish and came from Belfast. And, you know, folks over there are interested in knowing how that has influenced my work. So I do readings, but I also do workshops with a diversity of ages and folks. I work in the high schools. I work in college situations. I work with creatively aging folks. I go just about anywhere where people invite me, libraries, and I've even done a couple in private homes, which has been very fun. I also go into the prisons. Every January, I visit 18 prisons all at once for a month via Zoom. And we do writing projects together. I give them prompts. We all write. At the end, we share what we've written. So we spend about 35, 40 minutes writing, and then we spend the next almost 2 hours going from prison to prison to prison so that the inmates can share the work that they've written or something they've written before coming to class. And then I hold a contest for which they can submit work, and I myself jury the work, but also involve several of my poet colleagues to look over the work and choose a winner. So there's a first, second, third place winner and several honorable mentions. And whoever wins the prize, I go to their prison and spend time with them and their cohort, all who were working, in that particular prison. And so this year it was really fun. Last year, the winner was at Orient, and I went there, but I also went to Marysville because I really wanted to meet the women there in Marysville. They were just amazing. And this year, the winner happened to be at the Dayton Correctional Institute, which is also a women's prison, which was just, every time I go, it's an amazing experience. I love what's happening in our state. I can see why the recidivism numbers are going down. So much opportunity being created for inmates to grow and learn a skill so that they are ready to work when their time of incarceration is over. So that's always so thrilling to work with my inmate students. And they're so talented. It's amazing. And so many of them have told me, no one's ever taken the time with me like this. Nobody's ever shared this information with me. And it's a beautiful give and take. And I often am in tears when we do our read arounds after each writing session because the work is so vivid and so honest. And, you just see so much growth going on. So that's a near and dear to my heart. I do work in women's recovery facilities for the same reason. I think lots of times we land in trouble because we can't get ourselves focused and we can't figure out who we are and what we want. And it only takes one little mistake sometimes. And we live in a country that is very much inundated with drugs, whether legal or illegal. And addiction is very real. It is an illness. It is not laziness or lack of wanting to do well. It is something that befalls a person just like cancer or some other malady. And it's amazing once women are able to recover and be in a safe housing situation in which they are being told that they are special and wonderful and that they have talent and they have skills. And when they start finding out they do, it is so life-changing and so wonderful. So I feel so honored to be allowed to be a part of all that. And I did mention I do quite a few conferences at which I present panels, different topics, but most of them focused on writing and what editors want, mistakes I've made, and so that they don't make the same mistakes. And oftentimes I'll talk about where people can get their poems published if they care to try to send them out and have them published.
My question is, how do you become Ohio's poet laureate?
There is a process. The Ohio Arts Council is the fiscal agent for that. So everything goes through them. In Ohio, a person can self-nominate themselves or someone else can nominate you. And that process is that each person being nominated is required to have a manuscript. So about 10 to 15 poems, as I recall, because you have to remember, I applied in 2019, so it's been a while. And of course, a CV or resume. They want to see what you've been doing. And then a project. And of course, my project was to work with folks in recovery. And the unfortunate thing is a huge number of folks who are incarcerated currently are there because of addiction. And so that married so nicely. And of course, once that's submitted, and I had people all over the state who also nominated me, the OAC collects all of this information electronically. They go through it all. They choose a certain number of candidates to interview. So I went through an interview process. After the interviews, of course, there's the background check and all those things that we do now to make sure that we understand where people are coming from and what's been going on in their lives. And from there, if I think I'm understanding correctly, there are 3 or 4 top candidates selected by the Ohio Arts Council. And by saying that, I mean, there is a committee. So it was a huge committee of board members and local arts directors. And there was a poet laureate from another state who sat in on that board and others who appreciate poetry. They send these top 3 to 4 candidates to Governor DeWine. Well, it was Governor DeWine's office because I've been his poet laureate the whole time Governor DeWine has been in office.
Is there only one?
One laureate?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's for the whole state.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what happens is ultimately the governor's office receives these 3 to 4 packets with all of the information that's been garnered through nomination process and interview process and background check and, you know, on and on and on. And then the governor of Ohio chooses the poet laureate. So it is a government appointed job. And it's quite thrilling to realize that the governor of your state thinks that you're a worthy candidate to be the laureate. And then, as I said, I have been reappointed twice. So my tenure will end on December 31st of 2025.
So is there any particular poets that inspire you or is it something else that's like a muse for you?
That's two-pronged. Yes, there are poets who inspire me, and I'll come back to that if I forget, remind me. But my muse is really my people. I had a traumatic experience in my life and was having trouble coping. And so I started journaling, and then from journaling, writing poetry. And it was so healing for me. It really helped me focus. It helped me make sense of things. You know, lots of times when you can get things out of your head and on a piece of paper, you start to be able to make some sense of the chaos that's been going on inside. And so it was revelatory for me. I'm a word person. See it? I can't even say the word. And I realized I wanted everybody to experience that. I really wanted everyone to have that. And so I'm a regional poet, what they call a regional poet. So I write about my region and what I know. I do a lot of research, but not necessarily, I'm not a science poet, or I'm not a, any other genre. I write about what I know, and what I know about is Appalachia. I have researched my people, so I do go back 9 generations. I know that my daddy's people came to America and settled in Henrico County, Virginia in the 1700s. My mama's people were Irish, as I said. I'm a 4th generation Irish Appalachian. My mother's father's people are also 9 generations back, and they were also in Virginia, but they were in the part of Virginia that became West Virginia. And so that gives you an idea. Now, my daddy's people went from Virginia to North Carolina to South Carolina, and from South Carolina to Tennessee, and then Tennessee to Ohio. So I'm a 3rd generation Ohio Appalachian. So that's a lot to take in, I know. People who have influenced me are not necessarily Appalachian, although I would point out Rebecca Gale Howell. And on the other end of that, though, I would say Ross Gay, who is from Youngstown, Ohio, which I do not believe he is Appalachian, but he is a poet that I value so much for his ability to so cleverly help me understand every single word that he is putting on the page. And so I strive to do that myself. We have amazing poets here in Ohio. We have Pauletta Hansel and Dick Hague over in Cincinnati. We have Roy Bentley up in, I'm going to forget where, but mid-state. We have Scott Woods in Columbus, Ohio. We have Johnny McIntyre up in Toledo. I can go on and on. John Burroughs up in the Cleveland area, along with Jeremy Jessic. It's amazing. Ohio is so poetry rich. And what I love is, we kind of touched on this earlier, Michelle, when you were mentioning you might have watched too much news during lunch because your head was full of conflict.
Yes.
What I love about Ohio and its poets is there is not conflict. Nobody's trying to step on anybody else to get ahead. Everybody I've encountered has been kind and welcoming. Myself and others will do anything to help lift other voices. And so it's very rewarding because, like you said, the media is full of so much negativity. It's so wonderful to be around people and in an environment where people are not negative and are truly caring and thinking about lifting up others. So that's kind of what is always in my head all the time. My people, the land, what's happened to the land. If you don't know the Appalachian story, our ground has been extracted and extracted and extracted for generation upon generation. We're seeing the effects of it now, when we see the excessive flooding. Just a couple years ago, Eastern Kentucky had just a massive flood. And one of the things that the media does when something like that happens in Appalachia is they helicopter in, they find the sort of the scruffiest looking person they can find. They take a picture of that person and say, here's what's happening in Eastern Kentucky. And what they missed is that people from all over the United States flooded into Kentucky because they were somehow rooted to Kentucky, or they were Kentuckians who had outmigrated, and they flooded into Kentucky, and they did the restoration work. They all came together with those who were there. And I say, Kentucky saved themselves. It wasn't outsiders, and it wasn't the media. It was Kentuckians, because that's what Appalachians do. You know, we
Yes.
look after each other. We look after the land. We don't like to see people going without. And so those of us who weren't able to go down and work, we've certainly donated in so many ways, including myself donating poems to an anthology that's raising money for folks in Eastern Kentucky. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my philosophy and where I get inspired. I get inspired from what I see, what I hear, things that happen to me. And again, it's just wonderful. It's a great job.
Well, that sounds pretty cool. So what's a good characteristic of someone who would make a good poet?
Oh boy, that's really hard because there's a lot. We have a lot of people who can write extraordinarily, you know. But does that make them a good poet? It makes them a good poet on a piece of paper. But I think what I was just talking about is what makes a great poet. A great poet is someone who's keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening in our country, what's happening to their people, how they can help, how their words might be able to instigate conversation. I do get a little bit political in my poems because I want to start those conversations. Let's talk about what's happened to the land and what is still happening based on what happened before. We're still battling, fracking all over Appalachia and what the waste products of that is doing to the environment, and not just here, but what it's doing to the earth all over the country as they're dumping those, spoiled waters in landfills and other places, that they're trying to store this liquid underground. So it's not just affecting Appalachia per se, or even, well, it is affecting greatly rural America, which is, where they're trying to dump all of this waste product. And in Appalachia itself, we've already had this runoff of acid spoil from all of the mountaintop mining. So, when I think about nature and I think about the earth, I think, wow, what a strong, strong woman she is, because every time someone tries to put her down, she manages to just pull right back up and grow her seeds and cover the ugliness. And she manages somehow to filter out the acid. And that's, of course, with a lot of help from a lot of people who care about the environment and who care about the land.
So what is poetry slam?
The poetry slam is someone who has recited their work, and they write in a magnificent rhythm, and they stand at the mic, and it's almost like they're singing because they are making this amazing music with just their words. And I've been to a poetry slam and I've seen it. Everybody in the crowd's doing this, they're moving their heads and their hands, and they can't sit still because the slam is just so amazing. And but I mentioned Scott Woods earlier, and Scott Woods is a Columbus poet who is doing such amazing work for Columbus, and in particular for the African-American community there. And the slams that he's involved in are just, just kind of knock your socks off sort of stuff. So I encourage everyone to go to one. It's just really amazing to see words spring to life in that way. And you will actually hear music while people are speaking, and your body just can't sit still.
Can you speak to the generative writing workshop?
Generative, yeah. A generative writing workshop is something where you kind of guide people from this step to this step to this step to this step, so that by the time they're done, they have enough information to write something pretty cohesive. So in other words, generative, we help you generate ideas and words and phrases so that you can then create something, whether it be in class or you take it home with you. But that's what generative means. It means to help folks generate full thoughts and ideas.
What do you think the biggest mistake is when someone sits down to try to write a poem or a piece?
Probably getting too nervous about it. Like, I think a lot of people worry too much that they're not like others, or they're not following certain rules, or I think a big one is they think they're not good enough. And so they defeat themselves the minute they sit down. And I always encourage people to journal when that happens. Just start journaling, write what's in your head. Why do you feel that way? And then again, once you get that all out, you're dealing with the chaos. Lots of times what I will do is I will start making lists. Like, I'll just pick up something arbitrary. Like, this is a little lipstick tube, because I know people are listening, not watching. So it's a little lipstick tube. And I'll say to myself, okay, write about this. So I'll make a list of words. So it's a tube, it's plastic, it's white and burgundy. Actually, it's raspberry. 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 I grow raspberries in my garden, and my granddaughter loves the raspberries. And one time when she was little, I got a video of her tasting the raspberries and the tone of her voice when she said, "Ooh, ah, ooh, yum, yum, yum." So see, I'm already starting to write a poem about my granddaughter and the video I took and the raspberries. And I'm going to go off on that and talk about how the raspberries glisten in the sun in the morning because of the dew and how sweet they are, and her face and the expressions on her face and what was the color of her hair and how old was she and how do I remember that? And that all came from a lipstick tube. So you just have to give yourself permission to write. If you give yourself permission and really let go and don't get all nervous and hung up about it, you're going to do great.
So I understand there's a writer's revision workshop.
Yes.
Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yes, that's coming up at the Veterans Memorial and Museum in Columbus, Ohio. It is the national one. It is the national museum and memorial dedicated to our veterans. And a lot of people don't realize that they want everyone to come. It's not just for veterans, it's for everyone to visit. And they have wonderful displays and conference rooms and amazing spaces that you can meet in. And so they really encourage folks to visit and come in. And so I've been trying to help get out that word. So I was there last winter with an open mic and a generative writing class. And I just really wanted to come back again. The folks there are so wonderful. And so the revision class is about those who have written poems and feel like they're not quite there yet and they just need a little bit of help. So myself and the poet laureate, the laureate of Cincinnati, Ohio, Yale Kamara, the poet laureate of Toledo, Johnny McIntyre, and the poet laureate of Parma, Jeremy Jessic. The four of us are going to sit down with whoever would care to join us. They will bring a poem or a short piece of fiction or nonfiction. And as a group in this beautiful safe space, we're going to look at each and every poem or piece of writing and make suggestions on how perhaps they might improve. And we may get some that need no improvement at all. But what I usually find is it'll be a word or two that there's a better word. There's a better word for that, than maybe the person has used that could make it a stronger poem. Or lots of times what I do is I'll be writing poems and I won't have it in the right chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
My first stanza probably would work better in the middle. And that middle stanza is actually a better beginning, that sort of thing. So we're coming together, we're dedicating our time, we're donating our time to having this amazing revision workshop in which we can make suggestions to folks. And we all grow from that because we all learn things. We learn techniques. We learn to accept critique. We get to know each other. We build our network because we're meeting new people, and those people are going to go out and talk to other people about what they learned, and they're all going to go out and talk to other people about what they learned. And so before you know it, lots of people are spreading this wealth of knowledge that happened at the Veterans Memorial and Museum.
So when it's all said and done, what kind of legacy would you like to leave?
Well, I think one of the projects that I did for Ohio, I received a $50,000 grant from the Academy of American Poets to create an anthology of Appalachian Ohio poets because it had never been done before. Most people, when they think of Appalachia, they think of the South, and they don't think of Ohio. And we're beginning to hear about Northern Appalachia, but Northern Appalachia doesn't seem to quite include Ohio as well, although they are getting so much better about it. And so I wanted to put Ohio Appalachia on the map, and I really feel like we did that. 131 Ohio-based Appalachian poets in the anthology. And I received support from the Foundation from Appalachian Ohio, who donated funding to put a copy of that anthology in every public library in Ohio. So anyone who wants to read that anthology can do so. It's called I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing, Ohio's Appalachian Voices. You don't have to buy it. You can check it out at the library. And inside are poets from the age of 14 through the age of 80. We have folks who are recovering from addiction. We have all walks of life, all skin tones, all temperaments. And it was such a joy to put that anthology together from start to finish. And then we traveled all over the state of Ohio reading, literally all over Ohio from that book. So everywhere we went, folks who lived in that area came and read their work to the community. And so many people don't realize that a quarter of our state of Ohio rests in Appalachia proper. And there are pockets of Appalachians spread throughout Ohio that are still strongly tied to their Appalachian roots. And so I think of that as a legacy. And the other part of that then would be that people would think fond or kindly of me as being someone who was open to helping others. And I hope to think I'm a good listener. I do like to talk a lot, as you can tell. So sometimes I have to remind myself to also listen. But that's what I would hope, is that people would remember that that through my service, that it was very important to me to lift up voices that might not otherwise be heard.
I think that's pretty evident in the work you're doing, going around to the jails and trying to include a lot of folks and really educate folks so they can have a voice. It's pretty important.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. Well, we really appreciate you sharing what you do and giving definition to your role. And I think a lot of people learn from it.
Well, I hope so. That's wonderful. And I thank you so much for having me in.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.